muryango uzwi nka OAFLA, aho nyine uyu muryango watangiye mu mwaka w'ibihumbi 2002 ugamije guhangana n'ibibazo cyangwa se n'ubwandu bw'agakoko gatera sida, kandi nanone uyu muryango unagamije ahanini gukorera ubuvugizi abamaze kwandura aka imiti kandi mu buryo butabagoye. Ikindi nanone kandi bakanakora n'ubukangurambaga kugira ngo harwanywe ubwandu ubushya, by'umwihariko mu kuba barinda abana kwandura bwa sida. Ibi ahanini dusanzwe tunabona umuryango Imbuto Foundation ufatanyamo na Minisante cyangwa se Minisiteri y'Ubuzima mu rwego rwo kurwanya ko abana bavuka ku babyeyi banduye aka gakoko, bakabarinda ko nabo bazavukana ako gakoko. Ni umuryango rero watangiye mu mwaka wa 2002 uzwi nka OAFLA, ukaba uhuje abafasha b'abakuru b'ibihugu, aho rero nyine bakora ubuvugizi, ariko uyu muryango hanini ukaba ugamije kurwanya icyorezo cya sida. U Rwanda rukaba rero rukomeje kwifatanya n'isi yose muri rusange mu kurwanya iki cyorezo. Muri aka kanya rero nyakubahwa Jeannette Perezida wa Repubulika Paul Kagame agiye kwinjira aha, ni nawe mushyitsi mukuru w'uyu munsi, kugira ngo iyi nama itangize ku mugaragaro. Akaba rero ari inama iza kureba ihuriro rya igiye kurebera hamwe ingamba zo kurwanya iki cyorezo ku mugabane wa Afurika. Mubaza rero kuba bari kuri pano cyangwa se baza gutanga ibiganiro, harimo nyakubahwa Eugene Masisi, akaba ari umufasha wa Perezida wa Repubulika wa Botswana. Haraza ko harimo Son Excellence Madame Hinda Debi Itno, akaba ari umugore wa Perezida wa Chad. Haraza kuba harimo kandi Son Excellence Madame Aissata Issoufou, akaba ari umufasha wa Perezida wa Nigeri. Harimo kandi nyine na baza gutanga ibyo biganiro, haraza kuba harimo na Donald Kaberuka, akaba ari twese turamaze hano mu Rwanda, akaba ari Perezida wa Conseil d'Administration du Fonds Mondial ishinzwe kurwanya icyorezo cya sida ndetse n'igituntu. Hanyuma haraza kuba kandi
Thank you. Please be seated. Her Excellency Madame Jeannette Kagame, Son Excellence Première Dame de la République du Congo et Présidente de l'OFLAD, Son Excellence Madame Antoinette Sassou Nguesso, Her Excellency First Lady of the Republic of Botswana, Madame Eugene Masisi, Chad, Madame Hinda Debi Itno, Son Excellence Madame Première Dame de la République du Niger, Madame Aissata Issoufou Mohamedou, Her Excellency First Lady of the Republic of Ghana, Madame Rebecca Akufo-Addo, UNAIDS Executive Director, Mrs. Winnie Byanyima, WHO Director General, Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, the Board Chair of the Global Fund to Fight HIV, TB, and Malaria, Mr. Donald Kaberuka, UNAIDS Director of Regional Support Team for Eastern and Southern Africa, Dr. Catherine Sozi, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocol observed. Murakazaneza, a warm welcome to this beautiful country of 1,000 hills. My name is Noella Bigirimana, and it is an absolute pleasure to be your moderator for today's session. Welcome to this high-level event of the Organization of African First Ladies for Development. OFLAD is a united voice for Africa's most susceptible citizens living with and affected by HIV/AIDS and other development issues that stand in the way of a developed Africa with healthy and empowered children, youth, and women. Today's theme will be around leadership of African First Ladies in the fight against HIV/AIDS. It is a pleasure to welcome our first distinguished speaker for today. Her Excellency Madame Jeannette Kagame, First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda, is a founding member and past president of OFLAD between 2004 and 2006. And she is also founder and chairperson of Imbuto Foundation, an organization that has impacted and shaped the life of countless of people, including mine. Your Excellency, First Lady, please welcome.
Thank you, Noella. Excellence, Madame la Présidente de l'OPTAD, Madame ma chère sœur Antoinette Sassou Nguesso, Excellencies, dear sisters, mes chères sœurs, Excellence Hinda du Tchad, Excellence Aïssata Issoufou, Première Dame de la République du Niger, Excellency Rebecca Akufo-Addo, First Lady of the Republic of Ghana, Excellency Neo Jane Masisi, First Lady of the Republic of Botswana, distinguished partners, esteemed ladies and gentlemen, bonjour, good morning. Permettez-moi tout d'abord d'exprimer des communautés et en mon nom personnel combien il m'est très agréable de commencer cette semaine avec vous. Votre présence honore ce panel autour de la question du leadership des Premières Dames d'Afrique dans la lutte contre le VIH-Sida et pouvoir organiser cette 20e conférence internationale sur le sida et les infections sexuellement transmissibles en Afrique, ICASA, est un honneur pour le Rwanda du fait de notre engagement de longue date dans ce combat contre le sida, mais aussi de voir réunir déterminés à résoudre ce grand défi de notre époque. Je vous souhaite donc la bienvenue à Kigali et vous invite à prendre le temps, en dehors de cette conférence, de visiter et de profiter de ce que notre pays des 1000 collines a à vous offrir. Distinguished guests, OFLAD was born 17 years ago out of our collective need to amplify the voices of those living with and affected by HIV and AIDS, especially the most vulnerable, among them women and children. At the time, the urgency of the situation in most of our countries demanded that each of us prioritize programs and projects that were suited to the needs of the most disadvantaged families that were affected. And as we gain more ground in the fight against HIV and AIDS, the strategies and scope of our organization as a whole have understandably evolved, reflecting a deeper understanding and appreciation of our reach as First Ladies. Dear sisters, distinguished partners, as we gather here today, there is a good cause for us to celebrate the impact of our joint efforts and continuous commitment. We can all attest to the difference that initiatives such as the Free to Shine campaign have made in each one of our countries, pushing us to strengthen our efforts and commitment to end pediatric AIDS and keep mothers healthy. At my foundation, Imbuto, we have also focused on designing and implementing projects which align with the national and international priorities set at a macro level, such as Rwanda's strategy for transformation, the Agenda 2063 of the AU, and the SDGs. Projects such as Family Package, born to address pressing PMTCT needs 18 years ago, offers a comprehensive package of services to families affected by HIV and AIDS, as well as teenage mothers. Through this project, HIV-positive families are linked to health centers, and adherence to ART treatment is ensured through the follow-up of a network of community health workers and peer educators. And thanks to the nationwide efforts, current PMTCT coverage have now reached 96%. Our adolescent sexual reproductive health projects, promoting access to information, quality treatment, and services for the youth, to decrease new HIV infections among young people in both urban and rural areas since 2010, also contribute to our national and continental fight against HIV and AIDS and STIs. Indeed, concerted efforts between public and private stakeholders have resulted in notable progress toward ending AIDS at different levels. In Rwanda, as of 2018, new HIV infections have decreased by 83%, and AIDS-related death had dropped by 82% in the last 20 years. Distinguished guests, celebrating our gains should also give way to a deep analysis of our journey thus far. It should be an opportunity for us to have genuine and open conversations about the diverse challenges, including those resulting from gender inequality, that despite our efforts keep holding the African continent back in terms of effectively responding and preventing HIV and AIDS among our people. It should be a chance for us to exchange ideas on possible solutions to achieve our demographic dividend. My dear sisters, as we reflect on our multifaceted roles in this journey to ensure that our communities fully thrive, let us acknowledge what has worked and reveal what has not. This, I believe, will enable us to make more meaningful interventions. Distingués invités, pour conclure, permettez-moi de vous remercier de nouveau de vous être joints à nous pour cette conférence d'ICASA, qui, je le crois, nous rapproche encore plus de notre objectif de mettre fin à cette épidémie qu'est le VIH-Sida. Je vous remercie de votre attention.
Merci, Votre Excellence. Merci de nous rappeler qu'on a effectué des challenges qui restent. Nous allons maintenant accueillir pour le discours d'ouverture Son Excellence Madame République du Congo et présidente de l'OFLAD. Votre Excellence, bienvenue.
Distinguée Première Dame et chères sœurs, Madame la directrice exécutive de l'ONU-SIDA, Mesdames et Messieurs les partenaires techniques et financiers, Mesdames et Messieurs les conseillers techniques, distingués invités, Mesdames, Messieurs. Je voudrais tout d'abord m'acquitter d'un devoir et qui, pour moi, est un réel plaisir, c'est celui de remercier les peuples du Rwanda et surtout ma sœur Jeannette Kagame pour toutes les marques d'attention et la chaleur de l'accueil qui nous a été réservé depuis notre arrivée dans cette belle ville de Kigali. Nous sommes ici dans une ville symbole de la capacité de résilience des peuples africains et d'une volonté maîtrisée d'offrir le mieux-être à nos populations. Distinguées Premières Dames, Mesdames et Messieurs, le passage d'une organisation à but spécifique comme l'était l'OCDAS à une autre au périmètre plus élargi comme le revendique l'OPDAD ne saurait nous faire oublier la matrice du combat qui nous avait réunis en 2002 à Genève. Notre leadership nous a permis d'enregistrer des succès notables dans la lutte contre le VIH et le sida et nous a valu, sans fausse modestie, la reconnaissance de nos partenaires publics et privés. Je voudrais donc rassurer nos partenaires et nos populations que les Premières Dames, à travers leur nouvelle plateforme de plaidoyer, continueront à accorder une attention soutenue à la lutte contre le VIH et le sida. Notre volonté d'atteindre les 90-90-90 ne se démentira jamais. Et nous sommes convaincus que les objectifs contenus dans notre plan stratégique nous offrent le cap pour atteindre le monde sans sida que nous voulons d'ici à 2030. Cette session de haut niveau doit nous permettre, à travers nos échanges, de discuter sur le rôle de leadership unique que jouent les premières régionales et mondiales dans la lutte contre le VIH et le sida. Mettre en évidence les principaux défis, les enseignements tirés et les opportunités pour mettre fin au sida en 2030. Établir et renforcer les partenariats pour faire progresser l'intégration de la riposte au VIH dans les programmes plus larges de la santé et du développement. Enfin, renouveler les engagements pour mettre fin au sida à l'horizon 2030. Nous pouvons nous réjouir de ce que, lors de la dernière réunion tenue à Lyon en France sur le renouvellement des ressources du Fonds mondial, des engagements financiers importants ont été annoncés et que, par conséquent, la lutte pour l'atteinte des objectifs fixés n'est plus une vue de l'esprit. Nous espérons aussi que les engagements pris à Abidjan en décembre 2017 lors de la dernière ICASA sur la question majeure du sida pédiatrique et de l'élimination de la transmission de la mère à l'enfant connaîtront une réelle avancée dans beaucoup de pays. Je voudrais donc, avant de clore mon propos, vous inviter à approfondir notre réflexion à un an de la grande conférence de l'UNISIDA en 2020, qui devra faire un point d'étape dans l'atteinte des objectifs 90-90-90. Nous devrons y arriver avec les propositions concrètes qui seront en phase avec notre plan stratégique. Tout en vous invitant à un débat fructueux, je déclare ouverte la session de haut niveau de l'OPLAD. Je vous remercie pour votre aimable attention.
Plateforme et de cette session de haut niveau et du point d'état des objectifs 90-90-90. I have now the distinct pleasure to welcome the UNAIDS Executive Director. UNAIDS is a founding member of the a founding partner of the OFLAD, and Mrs. Winnie Byanyima will set the tone and frame our discussion today. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Your Excellency, Madame Jeannette Kagame, First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellency, Madame Antoinette Sassou Nguesso, First Lady of the Republic of Congo and Chair of OFLAD, Your Excellencies, First Ladies of the Republic of Botswana, Ghana, Niger, Mali, and Chad, distinguished partners from the Global Fund, from the UN family, activists like myself from civil society, networks of people living with HIV/AIDS, Abanyarwanda n'Abanyarwandakazi muraho. Ndishimye ukuba namwe muri Kigali. I know I am murdering your language, but I try. All protocol observed. It's a great honor and it's a privilege for me to be among you today in Kigali to give my first address as a new Executive Director of UNAIDS at this special session of OFLAD at the 20th ICASA. I want to first salute the remarkable leadership of African First Ladies and the work that you have done and continue to do for a stronger HIV response in Africa. Since its inception in 2002, with first ladies from 18 countries, some of you still active today, UNAIDS has traveled hand in hand with OFLA to ensure that our children here in Africa are born HIV-free and their mothers are kept healthy. First ladies have played and continue to play a great role of advocates, of agents for transformative change in our societies, driving political will and the need for social justice. Today, 17 years later, we must celebrate your tremendous efforts to eradicate mother-to-child transmission on the continent and for treatment coverage. The Free to Shine campaign that 22 of you have launched and are implementing in your respective countries is a concrete example of your leadership. Hey, you people, you don't want to clap for them? Thank you. That's right. UNAIDS is currently supporting several of you to implement this campaign, and soon we're going to be sharing an HIV best practices toolkit to support you further. I've been asked to give an overview of the situation of HIV in Africa and where we stand in 2019. So here we go. Let me start with the good news. In 2018, almost 38 million people were living with HIV globally. Out of those, 24.5 were on treatment. That's a big achievement. Nearly 4 in 5 people living with HIV globally know their HIV status. That's big. That's big. Almost 2/3 of all people living with HIV were receiving life-saving ARV therapy. That's more than half, and more than half of those have suppressed viral loads. It means they don't transmit. That's amazing, amazing. In Africa, Eastern and Southern Africa has shown huge progress, reducing AIDS-related deaths by 44% since 2010, and reducing new infections by 28% from 2010. Great progress. 6 African countries reported achieving all the 3 90s, the targets, and among them are 3 countries with very high burdens: Botswana, Eswatini, and Namibia. So we have seen significant progress in Africa. We've seen progress on reducing mother-to-child transmission in 23 focus countries. 85% of pregnant women living with HIV are now on ART, and that is up by 43% since 2010. But despite these successes, global reductions in HIV infections and AIDS-related deaths are getting smaller and smaller year by year. Momentum is slowing. And the epidemic is changing. In 2018, more than half of all new HIV populations were among what we call key populations. So more than half of new infections are amongst these groups of people: sex workers, people who use drugs, gay men and other men who have sex with men, transgender people, and prisoners and their partners. These groups of people are not testing, are not getting on treatment because their rights continue to be denied. It's also unacceptable that today 6,200 adolescent girls and young women are infected with HIV every week. Every week, 6,200 young women, girls infected. We are letting them down. We can't let this happen. The Western and Central African region is lagging behind, especially for treatment coverage for pregnant women and for testing and treatment of children. Half of all children born with HIV who are not diagnosed early will die before their second birthday. In Northern Africa, we are seeing an alarming peak in new HIV infections, especially among adolescents who don't know their status. Young women and girls are at increased risk of HIV. Why? Because of harmful social norms and sexual and gender-based violence, especially in the humanitarian settings. Girls have limited knowledge don't get comprehensive sexual education. So they lack the power, the knowledge to make informed decisions about their health. And many countries are refusing to introduce comprehensive sexual education for moral reasons, for really misguided reasons. This is a matter of life and death now. Girls need to have the information they need to live healthy sexual lives. When it comes to financing the HIV response, I'd like to salute the leadership, the efforts of the African Union. They've contributed, many member states, to the replenishment of the Global Fund. That's great. That's great, thank you. But the total funding for the HIV response globally has decreased by $1 billion in 2018. So there is still a big financing gap in AIDS response, and we need to keep stepping up. To improve health outcomes, we need more domestic resources invested in our health systems and in the HIV response. But these responses must be human rights focused, must be gender responsive for them to have their highest impact. At UNAIDS, we'll be looking closely at how to support governments to maintain their health spending in a context of debt rising, in a context of austerity measures coming in. If I can give the example of Zambia, health spending has dropped by nearly 30% between 2015 and 2018, while debt repayments have increased by nearly 800%. We are making poor people, ill people, HIV people pay the price of debt. That is not right. So we must always work towards also removing the legal barriers and eradicate the social norms, including child marriage, that put women and girls at risk. We need to work together to advocate for the removal of parental consent laws. I keep saying, if I keep my right to stop my child from whatever, but the price is that my child is going to be exposed to risk and to die before they become an adult, what's the point of keeping this consent? So parental consent laws, we need to remove them so that, and trust our children to make the right decisions. And of course, we need to keep girls in school. 50% of the risk to girls is reduced by just keeping girls in secondary school. So let's aim to put all our girls in a secondary school classroom. I do not underestimate the challenges. They are huge, but I'm excited about the opportunity of what we can all do together. Thank you, First Ladies, for what you have done. Thank you for being part of this huge HIV movement and being a big driver of political will. We still need your leadership, your advocacy, your connection with communities, with opinion leaders, with religious leaders, your connection with civil society to keep HIV on top of the health priorities of our continent. I thank you so much.
Thank you, Mrs. Bianima, for underscoring the significant progress that we've seen in Africa and the need to maintain momentum in our programs and step up our financial commitment. I would like now to welcome for a keynote address Dr. Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, who's the WHO Director General, the UN Health Agency that's committed to achieving health for all. Welcome.
So like Winnie, I will also try Amakuru. And I learned also another one, Murakoza Neza. Your Excellency, Madam Gennet Kagame, First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda, Your Excellency, Madam Antoinette Sassou Nguesso, President of OFLAD, First Lady of the Republic of Congo, Your Excellency, Madam Hinda Debi Itno, Your Excellency, Madam Aissata Isufu Mahmouda, Your Excellency, Madam Neo Jane Masisi, Your Excellency, Madam Rebecca Akufo Addo, First Ladies of Chad, Niger, Botswana, and Ghana, respectively, and Dr. Winnie Bainima, the Executive Director of UNAIDS, Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear colleagues, and friends. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Organization of African First Ladies for Development for organizing this event and for your leadership on these issues. Since its establishment in 2002, the organization has been a trailblazer in Africa in raising awareness on the HIV/AIDS epidemic or pandemic, mobilizing resources, promoting strong community leadership, and networks to advocate for people living with HIV. I also congratulate you on your new strategic plan, which emphasizes universal health coverage and a healthier population in Africa. After a successful campaign specifically on HIV to shift into universal health coverage, of course, while putting HIV at the center is a very important move. Likewise, the Free to Shine campaign led by OFLAD and the African Union reinforces the political commitment of African nations to end childhood AIDS and keep mothers healthy. As First Ladies, you play an incredibly important role. You provide exemplary leadership and compassion on many health agendas, in particular through your commitment to fulfilling the vision of an AIDS-free Africa. You know the incredible progress we have made to eliminate mother-to-child transmission of HIV on our continent. Today, in more than 1 in 3 countries, more than 90% of HIV-positive pregnant women are receiving antiretroviral therapy. And I don't want to repeat what Winnie said. Eastern and Southern Africa are leading the elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV, with an average of 92% of pregnant women receiving antiretroviral therapy. Rwanda, Botswana, Malawi, and Namibia are among an ever-increasing number of countries making great progress on PMCT. But 1 in 3 is still nowhere near good enough. We have a lot of work to do. HIV, hepatitis B, and syphilis are all endemic in Africa. All 3 can be maternally transmitted. All 3 are devastating for mothers, families. All 3 take a heavy toll on health systems, with catastrophic expenditures for families leading to poverty in our communities. And all 3 can be prevented. The reason they're not is because the women and children they afflict lack access to integrated, quality antenatal services that are routine in many parts of the world. It's a matter of inequality. Many of you are mothers. You know that no mother should die when giving life. No child should be born with HIV, hepatitis. Don't have to. The services we're talking about can and should be provided to every mother through strong primary health care, which is the foundation of universal health coverage. That's why WHO recently signed a memorandum of understanding with the African Union to work together to strengthen primary health care and ultimately achieve UHC. Among other issues, we have also signed to work together, establishing African Medicines Agency and strengthening Africa CDC. This is a commitment that builds on the Addis Ababa call to action endorsed at the AU Summit earlier this year in February. These are very encouraging signs. One of the key challenges we face in building strong primary health care on this continent is the deficit of health workers. Between now and 2030, the world is facing shortfall of 18 million health workers, mostly in low and middle income countries, including in our Africa. About half of that shortfall is nurses and midwives who play a vital role in delivering quality antenatal services. To help close this gap, WHO has declared 2020 the year of the nurse and the midwife. Throughout the year, we will be holding advocacy events and working with countries to find ways of recruiting, training, and retaining nurses and midwives. We would very much value the support of OFLAD in this endeavor. Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, thank you once again for the opportunity to be here and to address you today. Eliminating mother-to-child transmission of HIV, syphilis, and hepatitis B throughout the continent is achievable, and you can help to provide the key ingredient, which is political commitment. I believe we can leverage your commitment even more. Your new strategic plan offers great potential for innovation and advancing UHC to provide health for all. To this end, I have one suggestion, that our two organizations, as you remember, WHO and OFLA, have signed a memorandum of understanding in 2016. But given the 2019-2023 strategic plan, we suggest that we revise our memorandum of understanding to work with you to achieve the ambitious targets you have set in the new strategic plan. And with your support, we can not only save many lives, we can change the course of history for our Africa. Thank you for your commitment and leadership. Together, let's build a healthier, safer, fairer Africa. I thank you. Murakoze cyane.
Thank you, Dr. Adhanom Ghebreyesus, for reminding us of the need to strengthen the foundation of the health system. And as you just mentioned, these key challenges are a matter of inequality. After listening to the speakers this morning, we'll have a panel session, and we're going to look at the interconnection between HIV, AIDS, and other health and development agendas. And as we know, as we just mentioned, it's a matter of inequality, and we know that HIV disproportionately affects women and adolescent girls. And as a young woman who was empowered by my community and my society, I can attest to the power of breaking down these barriers in the fight against HIV. I would like to ask Her Excellency, Madame Neogen Masisi, who's the First Lady of the Republic of Botswana, how does gender inequality increase women's vulnerability to HIV?
I'd just like to greet Her Excellency, First Lady of the Republic of Rwanda, Mrs. Jeanette Kagame, and thank you for having us here in Kigali. I also greet my sisters here, First Ladies from Chad, Niger, and Ghana. First of all, before I start, I'd just like to start with two numbers. The first number, pointing at people living with AIDS. And the second number, new infections for adolescents, young people aged 10 to 24. I'm sharing these numbers that are from Botswana and they're from 2018. People living with AIDS in 2018, of the 360,000 adults or people in the reproductive age, 56% and 44% were men. The second number, new infections, young people aged 10 to 24, 34% of the new infections occur amongst these young people. And of these young people, 69.9% are female, while 30.1% are male. I just wanted to illustrate, as you said, that women, and here we are, where 2030 is around the corner, and we have these women who are left behind. As the moderator said, I will respond to the question that says, how does gender equality increase women's vulnerability to HIV? In response to this, I'd just like to look at 3 broad areas to say the answers fall into the social determinants, economic, and also political. I'll start with the social. The fact that our societies in Africa are predominantly still very much patriarchal, where men have the upper hand, or I will call it the upper power. In that case, thus rendering the women lower negotiating powers, because the men have higher controlling power. In that case, overpowering the women in issues of negotiating contraception, protection during sex, and the very sexual and reproductive health rights. Secondly, the prevalence of GBV, especially intimate partner violence. Where I come from, GBV prevalence amongst women, it's 37%, while men is 21%. Thirdly, cultural socialization. We have beliefs and attitudes that disadvantage women. There are still women today who believe that because men have the upper hand, they still believe that men actually have a right to abuse them. Fourthly, women as caregivers of the sick or caregivers of orphans during epidemics such as these and others. Women may get infected. I remember back in the days in my country, mothers did not handling their children. Another factor under social is we are seeing a growing trend of female-headed households. These may lend to economic stress because the woman has to take care of the children. In our culture also, the women have to take care of extended families. We are also seeing teenage pregnancies on the increase. These very women who are now grandmothers have to take care of the next generation, being their grandchildren. The economic factors, we know women predominantly bear the brunt of poverty. Their low income status makes them vulnerable because of the power again. They have lower negotiating power, and you find that they place high dependency on the men. At the political, we have a number of discriminatory laws which lend dependency on men again. For instance, property laws, laws pertaining to land rights, laws pertaining to inheritance. On a final note, I'd just like to close off by just emphasizing that we need not leave these women behind. we need to make sure that these women are also advantaged as the men. Because healthy women result in a healthy nation, and this converts to a productive nation which drives development forward. I'd also like to just say and urge all of us to say we need urgent interventions at this point from each and every one of us. I thank you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for reminding us and underscoring the need not to leave anyone behind and to address these women's vulnerability to HIV. Sur le thème des populations les plus vulnérables, en particulier le mariage d'enfants, qui est un facteur qui contribue à l'expansion du VIH, j'allais demander à Son Excellence Madame Hinda Déby Itno, Première Dame de la République du Tchad, de nous dire un peu sur les programmes focalisés sur le mariage d'enfants et comment ces programmes peuvent être des points d'entrée pour la prévention et le traitement du VIH.
Merci. Madame la Présidente de l'OBDAD, ma sœur Jeannette Kagame, Première Dame du Rwanda, mes sœurs Première Dame d'Afrique, Madame la Directrice exécutive de l'ONU-SIDA, Monsieur le Directeur général de l'OMS, distingués invités, tout protocole observé, Mesdames et Messieurs. Je voudrais avant tout propos remercier ma sœur Jeannette Kagame et à travers elle tout le gouvernement et le peuple rwandais pour l'accueil combien fraternel à nous réserver chaque fois que l'occasion nous est donnée de fouler la terre de ces pays frères. Je voudrais également exprimer ma haute appréciation pour les dispositions prises pour la parfaite organisation de cet événement, combien important pour la santé des populations et l'avenir de notre continent. Cela dit, en ma modeste qualité de Première Dame du Tchad, qu'il me soit permis de relever ici que nous devons arrimer et réajuster notre approche de lutte contre le sida pour l'adapter aux réalités de l'heure. Les faits sociaux sont têtus. Pour preuve, tous les pays ont interdit le mariage des enfants. Barrière pour déjouer la pression familiale qui pousse les adolescents à un mariage soit arrangé, soit forcé. En effet, le mariage des enfants constitue non seulement une violation des droits humains, avant l'âge légal sont exposés à un risque relativement élevé d'infection par le VIH en raison de leur jeune âge et de leur immaturité physique. Malgré les progrès réalisés dans le monde en termes d'accès aux services de prévention et de traitement du VIH, le sida est actuellement la principale cause de décès en Afrique chez les adolescents âgés de 10 à 19 ans. À la Fondation Grand Cœur que je préside, nous avons initié un programme intitulé « Maintien de jeunes filles à l'école », où nous encourageons et accompagnons les fillettes à pousser plus loin dans leurs études en leur octroyant des bourses. Éduquée, la jeune fille saura comment se protéger du VIH. Il est également impérieux de mener des études pointues pour cerner dans toutes ses facettes les besoins des adolescents, à l'effet d'érayer le mariage des enfants et par ricochet accommoder nos programmes de prévention et de traitement du VIH. Mieux, nos programmes de lutte contre le VIH doivent prendre en compte le volet autonomisation des filles. Nombre de pays élaborent des stratégies, des plans d'action et des campagnes au niveau national afin d'aborder la question du mariage des enfants au sein de plusieurs secteurs, notamment la santé, l'éducation, l'emploi et la justice. Aussi, il est primordial que les programmes sur le VIH soient liés à des initiatives multisectorielles pour mettre fin au mariage des enfants, en particulier les programmes axés sur les interventions en matière de santé sexuelle et reproductive pour les adolescentes et leurs partenaires sexuels. Bref, Si nous voulons être des leaders en matière de lutte contre le VIH dans nos pays respectifs, il ne nous reste plus qu'à imbriguer programme, mariage des enfants, prévention et de traitement du VIH, car l'attelage ici est possible et la lutte aisée à nos yeux. Merci de votre aimable attention.
Merci, Votre Excellence, de partager le travail important de votre association et les efforts pour mettre fin au mariage des enfants. Sur le thème du VIH et des autres infections associées au VIH, il est très important d'avoir une approche intégrée. Et j'allais demander à l'une de nos panélistes, la première dame de la République du Niger, son Excellence Madame Aïssata Issoufou Mahamadou, pourquoi devrions-nous plaider en faveur de la triple élimination de la transmission mère-enfant du VIH, de l'hépatite et de la syphilis?
Merci. Ma chère sœur Jeannette Kagame, Madame la Présidente de l'OBDAD, mes chères sœurs Première Dame d'Afrique, je voudrais également saluer la directrice exécutive de l'ONU-SIDA, le directeur général de l'OMS et tous les invités et les participants. Merci d'être là. Des questions de santé qui concernent notre cher continent. Nous avons, pendant plusieurs années, depuis la création de l'OBDAS, qui est devenu l'OBDAD, les premières dames d'Afrique ont, sans relâche, bataillé pour faire reculer le VIH-Sida sur notre continent. Parce qu'il se trouve que c'est le continent le plus affecté et c'est le continent qui a le moins de moyens pour s'en sortir tout seul. Alors, actuellement, on se rend compte aussi qu'en dehors du VIH-Sida, il y a l'hépatite B et la syphilis, qui sont des maladies sexuellement transmissibles, tout comme le VIH et tout comme le VIH-Sida. Mais il se trouve que dans la lutte contre ces maladies, nous ne sommes pas très avancés. Et le la lutte contre le VIH-Sida est celle qui est la plus structurée de par le monde. Alors, qu'est-ce qu'il y a le mieux à faire? Le mieux à faire pour avancer vite, je pense, que c'est de s'inspirer des pratiques des pratiques concernant la lutte contre le VIH-Sida. Et dans ces pratiques, il y a la transmission mère-enfant qui est l'axe prioritaire pour la lutte contre le VIH-Sida, pour pouvoir aboutir à une génération indemne de VIH. Et donc, je pense que compte tenu de cela, la triple élimination de la transmission mère-enfant, du VIH, de l'hépatite B et de la syphilis est une approche tout à fait appropriée pour aller vite dans l'éradication de ces maladies. Ces trois maladies, VIH, hépatite B, syphilis, sont toutes trois des infections qui peuvent se transmettre de la mère à l'enfant. Et l'élimination de telles infections nécessite des actions semblables. Les interventions d'élimination de la transmission mère-enfant comprennent le dépistage prénatal, le traitement des mères infectées et la prophylaxie pour les nourrissons, notamment la vaccination et le suivi. Dans le contexte actuel du Niger, les dispositifs sanitaires périphériques qui sont déjà des centres de santé intégrés sont donc en faveur d'une stratégie intégrée. Aussi, Plaider en faveur de la triple élimination de la transmission mère-enfant du VIH, de l'hépatite B et de la syphilis a de nombreux avantages pour les différentes cibles de nos programmes de santé. 1. Pour le couple mère-enfant, leur famille et leur communauté. Premièrement, on obtient l'amélioration de l'accessibilité géographique et financière aux soins et services de santé de qualité à travers le dépistage et traitement précoce de la syphilis qui est curable et une fois guéri, protège l'enfant à la naissance. Ensuite, la vaccination dès la naissance du nouveau-né de mère porteuse de l'hépatite B et moins de dépenses liées à la prise en charge de l'hépatite B. Puis, la PTME contre le VIH, qui est déjà intégrée dans le paquet d'activités des centres de santé et soutenue par une approche communautaire de la PTME, qui a été mise en place par la Fondation Gourivi Meilleur, que j'ai l'honneur de présider, œuvre dans la région de Niamey avec de très bons résultats grâce à l'engagement de tous les Nigériens. Pour les prestataires de services de santé, qui sont donc la deuxième cible, on voit la diminution de la charge de travail et du chevauchement des activités. Ensuite, moins de références des clients, ce qui entraînera la diminution des perdus de vue. Ensuite, troisièmement, c'est par rapport à l'État. Donc, pour l'État, on voit une harmonisation des directives nationales de prévention et de prise en charge du VIH, de l'hépatite et de la syphilis. Puis, une coordination des programmes verticaux. Ensuite, cela ce plaidoyer qui consiste à vouloir prendre les trois maladies ensemble, c'est la meilleure chose qui puisse nous arriver pour que nous puissions avancer le plus rapidement possible dans la lutte contre les maladies, parce que l'Afrique n'a pas les moyens de faire séparément pour chacune de ces maladies si elle a les possibilités de le faire ensemble. Merci de votre aimable attention.
Merci, Votre Excellence, de partager l'expérience de votre pays et le travail important de votre association. Cette approche appropriée, comme vous le dites, a plusieurs avantages dans l'éradication des trois infections. We are now going to turn to the UNAIDS Regional Director for Support Team for Eastern and Southern Africa. As we heard earlier from the Executive Director, Mrs. Byanyima mentioned the need to ensure that HIV intervention are availed during emergencies. Could you tell us more why it is important to include HIV interventions in humanitarian emergencies?
Thank you very much, Program Director. Your Excellency, Madam Jeanette Kagame, Your Excellency, Madam Antoinette Sassou Nguesso, your flag President, Your Excellencies in the room, ladies and gentlemen, and all protocols observed. So you've asked me to answer HIV interventions in humanitarian emergencies. I represent the Eastern and Southern Africa region, which remains the epicenter of the AIDS epidemic. And for sure, tremendous progress has been made for reducing mortality and reducing new infections. Global solidarity with parliaments or AFLAD have really contributed to the progress that has been made, but it remains unfinished business. I do not doubt that everyone in this room agrees that we need to include HIV interventions in humanitarian emergencies. Sadly, just because we agree has not led to action, to scale up, to change the lives of many. But before I proceed, I'd like to really appreciate the strong commitments made by your excellencies, First Ladies, most recently at the margins of the TICAD 7 and at the 74th UNGAS, where you're talking about ending gender-based violence and ending the HIV epidemic. And the decisions that you have taken at these four really reaffirm the collective action that each one of you is making and your mobilization to tackle HIV, but also importantly to also tackle violence in all its forms for young women, adolescents, and girls. Ladies and gentlemen, humanitarian emergencies include natural disasters, which can occur very quickly. For example, landslides and floods, which happen in this region quite often in communities, or more gradually, for example, drought. And for those who are coming from Southern Africa, you know that many of the countries are in a drought situation as we speak. But it can also include man-made emergencies, including armed conflict, environmental degradation, and large-scale industrial accidents. And all these force thousands to flee from their homes, looking for safety, looking for quality of life for themselves and their loved ones. The displacement not only affects people forced from their homes, but also the host communities, those living in areas accommodating people who have been displaced. Many others face human disasters, remain at home, but find themselves in fragile states. And this is where the definition of what is fragile states is key. Areas within our communities are frequently fragile. A lot of the informal settlements are fragile. So we end up with very complex and multifaceted emergencies. The disruption of what any one of us in this room would call normal social and economic structures and activities often involves that mass displacement. And you can imagine what that leads to. Breakdown of social cohesion, lack of income, shortage of food, sexual violence, which we've talked about, increased drug and alcohol use, and the disruption of health, education, and infrastructure that characterize complex. These are the issues that characterize these complexities. And as you can well imagine, the emergencies all contribute to putting populations affected by these crises at greater risk of HIV and present challenges for those already living with the virus. And moreover, populations most at risk of HIV in times of stability, particularly children, adolescents, and young women, and key populations, as has been mentioned already, may become more vulnerable during these crises as existing forces of marginalization intensify and their needs are deprioritized. And during these emergencies, and I don't need to go into detail, the health systems are put under strain, hampering the provision of treatment and prevention of HIV. Healthcare staff, who are principally women, find it harder to do their jobs and access facilities that could, and this could be to a range of factors, including safety. And similarly, the clients, and we know that it's women who frequently access healthcare facilities, find themselves in a difficult situation. Emergencies cause problems with the supply of medication, including antiretrovirals, where we tell people that they need to continue taking their treatment in order for their viral loads to remain low. And prevention items, the supply of condoms and testing kits, always translate, clarify that. The spread of HIV is really context-specific. But we know that improved protection, health, education, and social services may contribute to a decreased spread of HIV. And this suggests that the vulnerability due to HIV and risk can be managed and mitigated in some contexts during emergencies. And overcoming barriers to treatment, targeted prevention services, and the protection of rights is really key. Mitigation is not always possible and will depend very much on the factors that have been mentioned by the UNAIDS Executive Director, including the laws and policies that, and also on how long an emergency or conflict continues. Yesterday we commemorated World AIDS Day, and although some of us were not here in Kigali, we were with you. We commemorated World AIDS Day across the continent, recognizing the essential and valuable role that communities play and continue to play in the AIDS response. It is key that we complement their efforts with political leadership that this meeting calls for. I would like to suggest that OAFLAD can leverage the role of the African Union Champion for Gender and seize the opportunity of next year's AU theme, Silence the Guns, Creating Conducive Conditions for Africa's Development, to urge member states and governments to integrate HIV in humanitarian settings. And finally, First Ladies, you can seize the opportunity, as you're doing now, to reaffirm your commitment towards an AIDS-free Africa, but including a contextualized response to humanitarian emergencies, which seem to be on the increase. And they're not just big tsunamis, but they're in the informal settlements where many people live.
Thank you, Dr. Sozi, for reflecting on what happens when there's a breakdown in structure, such as in humanitarian emergencies, and the importance for communities in the response. Today, we reflected on many factors and complexities that put populations at greater risk of HIV and AIDS. And as we know, health systems exist within a broader context of socioeconomic development. I would like to turn to Dr. Donald Kaberuka, who's the board chair of the Global Fund to Fight HIV, AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, to ask him how we can advance women and girls' issues within the broader context of healthcare and the development agenda.
I join my colleagues in commending our First Ladies for a job well done. I was a witness at the last conference in Lyon in November for the replenishment of the Global Fund, where, thanks to your support, we were able to raise $14 billion. I don't think we could have done this without the support of people like you. This will enable us to scale up the work we do in the different areas you have mentioned, but also to help countries build their own health systems. Now, great points have been made, so I want to fix my attention just on 2 points, which I think we need to focus on as Africans. My first point is the following. We're all celebrating the big achievements in HIV/AIDS, and they are significant. But I want to say to everyone in this room that that is largely due to a huge international mobilization which began in the year 2000. The last 18 years have been almost the golden era in terms of global support to public health. Now, as a result of the global financial crisis in 2008, we have seen that from 2012, international support for global health is flattening out and might decline. It is important I say this because nothing we have done is irreversible. It will be irreversible only if we are able to ensure that our own countries increasingly are able to fund these programs. If we didn't, we fall back. Sadly, technical issue here is about how can we sustain the progress we have done on mother-to-child transmission, on all these great things we have heard here this morning. Now, so Noel, you asked the question about the broader context. In the last 15 years, Africa has done quite well economically, except a few pockets. Economies are growing at about 7–8%. But in the majority of countries, that does not translate into increased expenditure for public health. And so we're seeing economic growth, we're seeing countries getting wealthier, getting richer, but they are not necessarily increasing expenditure on public health. I would like to ask our First Ladies here to make this your campaign. We committed in Abuja to spend 15% of our budgets on public health. It is not happening in the majority of countries, even those who have the means to do so. Now, in the context of declining international support, it is very important that we sustain these achievements by steadily, I'm not saying suddenly, steadily, assuming these responsibilities ourselves. It will not happen overnight. Clear. Let me link that to another point. In some countries, including those here in this room, it is true that debt services are beginning to crowd out health expenditures. So when countries have to repay large amounts of debt, typically the first items to be cut are health and education, because it is hard to cut on infrastructure, stuff like that. So usually the first victims of fiscal consolidation are health and education. This is extremely risky. And I want to believe that many of our governments have their eyes on this issue. But this is related to a third issue, now that the First Lady of Niger and Chad are here. In the region of the Sahel, security expenditures are beginning to squeeze out health expenditures. Because those countries are confronted with terrorism and others from the north. And so in places like Chad, northern Cameroon, northern Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Mali, elsewhere, expenditures are under pressure because of those activities. We deploy our resources to ensure that we get maximum value for money. It's not simply how much money we spend, but how we spend it to ensure that every dollar gives us maximum value. The second point I wanted to make here is the following. The majority of Africans are very young people, that is well known. The median age is 19 years. So the majority of Africans are around 19 years. They don't know, they never lived the crisis of HIV/AIDS of earlier years. They read about it, but if you tell them schools were empty, doctors were dying, the labor force was being decimated, they don't have that experience. And therefore, I think we are focused so much, like I'm sitting next to my brother Tedros, perhaps on the disease and curing it, and I think science is contributing, but I have a feeling that going forward, we have to go back to the efforts we did in the last years on prevention of HIV/AIDS. Because we have a generation, thank you, we are living with a majority of Africans who don't know the crisis of the 1980s. And as a result, the efforts on prevention have receded. It is important that we go back to the efforts of the 1980s, 1990s. Science and drugs will continue to be available. I think between WHO, UNAIDS, Global Fund, UNITAID, a lot of work is being done to combine resources and science so that drugs are available. But that is not the end solution. The end solution is elimination, and the solution to elimination is prevention. And the last point I want to make here is the following. At the end of the day, some of these diseases are linked to poverty, deprivation, and inequality. And inequality today is the #1 issue in the world. Economies are growing. The top 10% are getting wealthier. The majority of people in the world are getting poorer. And that means disease burdens like these ones make that inequality even more acute. And therefore, for me, the three big ticket items going forward would be, how do we sustain the progress we have done over the last 20 years with our own resources? How do we go back to mobilize the youth to prevention? And thirdly, how we ensure that we deal with inequality, which is worsened by disease burden. Therefore, I want to salute the organizers of this conference, because yesterday there was a big gathering of young people here. And it was impressive to see that they're beginning to seize this agenda themselves. And I want to also tell you that the head of the Global Fund has decided to set up a global youth council for HIV/AIDS, precisely for the reasons I've just mentioned. That we have to listen to the young people what they say about marginalization, about inequality, about jobs. In that way, we can make progress. These are the 3 points I wanted to make, and I want to thank you for what you have said this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kaberuka. As you're saying, it's almost like we have to go back to the basics. There's science, there's resources, but there's also going back and ensuring that we keep the efforts in the prevention. And as you said, and as the Director of General of the WHO mentioned, it's a matter of inequality as a very major issue. As we keep reflecting on these numbers, I want to challenge each of us in the room. Some of these numbers are encouraging, others are very concerning. So the challenge for each of us in this room is to think of them as these are lives. It's not just numbers. There's a person behind each and every one of these numbers. In today's session, we have the distinct honor of welcoming a special person in the room. We've mentioned many factors that impact HIV and AIDS, and this person has been affected by many of these factors that we are reflecting on today. And so we're about to hear from Mrs. Sylvie Muneza, who's going to tell us and discuss with us today and share her perspective. So Sylvie, welcome.
Banje kubasuhuza muraho neza. Amazina yanjye nitwa Muneza Sylvie, nkaba mfite imyaka 47, ndi umupfakazi, nabyaye umwana umwe, umwana wanjye yavutse nta virusi itera sida afite. Namenye ko mfite virusi itera sida mu mwaka w'1998. Icyo gihe nari maze igihe mfite indwara inkorora idakira, nyimara igihe kinini. Na kwa muganga, ngeze kwa muganga basanga mfite igituntu. Nibwo icyo gihe bahise bampima basanga mfite virusi itera sida. Muri icyo gihe kumva sida byari ikibazo, byari urupfu, nko kumva urupfu. Nyimara kumva ko mfite virusi itera sida, ndabyibuka icyo gihe nashatse kwiyahura mu modoka ngo zingonge.
So we'll have live translation in French only, but as she completes her testimony, I'll be able to share some of the key points in English. Thank you. So channel 2 is French, and then 1 is English. 3 is English. Sorry, bear with us. So channel 3 is English, channel 1 is French. So everyone will be able to hear this important message.
Amazina yanjye nitwa Muneza Sylvie, nkaba mfite imyaka 47, ndi umupfakazi, mfite umwana umwe, nabyaye umwana umwe, umwana wanjye yavutse nta virusi itera sida afite. Namenye ko mfite virusi itera sida mu mwaka w'1998. Icyo gihe nari maze iminsi mfite inkorora idakira, biba ngombwa ko njya kwa muganga basanga mfite igituntu, barangije barampima basanga mfite virusi itera sida. Kumva sida icyo gihe cyari ikibazo gikomeye cyane, kuko sida nta muti nta n'urukingo byari bihari. Icyo gihe ndabyibuka nashatse kwiyahura, ku buryo nifuzaga ko imodoka zangonga ngo nipfire, ariko hari impamvu Imana yabikoze, ntabwo napfuye. Ndabyibuka nkigera mu rugo, abaturanyi banjye, imiryango yanjye, hari harimo akato kenshi cyane, abanyegeraga bumvaga ko nabo ngomba kubanduza. Muri icyo gihe twari duturanye abantu benshi bagendaga bari gupfa bishwa na sida, imfubyi zari zihari ari nyinshi. Ndabyibuka icyo gihe byabaye ngombwa ko mu buzima bubi nari ndimo, byabaye ngombwa ko n'imfubyi twari duturanye za sida ndetse n'abandi bamwe bari bagenzi banjye bari bameze nkanjye, kuko nari meze nabi cyane, nari mfite ibiro 20. Icyo gihe imisatsi yanjye yari yaracuramye, ubona ko mbese ubuzima bwarangiye. Ariko kwa gukomeza kunywa umuti neza w'igituntu, byabaye ngombwa ko ubuzima bugenda buza buke buke. Abaturanyi banjye bagendaga batuvamo bishwe na sida, imfubyi ziraho ari nyinshi, biba ngombwa ko negeranya abantu bo muri quartier b'abana b'imfubyi za sida, n'abandi bamwe bari bameze nka bagenzi banjye, twishyira hamwe dushinga association tuyita Igihozo, ryitwa ishyirahamwe ry'abantu bafite virusi itera sida ndetse ryita no ku mfubyi za sida. Muri icyo gihe muri ubwo buzima twari turimo, niko n'ahandi mu bihugu mu turere hirya no hino hari harimo abantu bameze nkanjye. Byabaye ngombwa ko twiyegeranya, ndibuka twaje turi mu mujyi wa Kigali, turiyegeranya twegera leta y'u Rwanda, tuyereka ikibazo dufite, by'umwihariko ikibazo cy'umuti cyari kigoye cyane, n'akato n'ihezwa byadukorerwaga mu baturanyi byari bigoye, ndetse n'abana n'imfubyi zacu za sida zari ziri aho ngaho zari zikeneye kubaho. Leta yageze aho iratwumva, ireba isanga ko natwe dukeneye kuvamo abantu nk'abandi. Icyo yakoze, ikintu cyihutirwaga kwari kudushakira umuti. Mu by'ukuri umuti, leta y'u Rwanda yaduhaye umuti, yadushakiye umuti twarawubonye, umuti tubonera ubuntu rwose. Nimushimire iki gihugu cyacu cy'u Rwanda. Muri icyo gihe ubuzima bwari bukomeye cyane, mu kwivuza mu ndwara z'ibyuririzi zari zitwugarije zari nyinshi, kwivuza nabyo byari bigoye. Turashimira nyakubahwa First Lady wafashe iya mbere abinyujije mu Mbuto Foundation, kiriya gikorwa wadukoreye cy'abafite virusi itera sida, kugira ngo dushakire mituweli de sante. Iriya myaka 5 hari icyo yatugejejeho nyakubahwa First Lady. Muri icyo gihe nibwo twakomeje kwicara tureba n'ibibazo bihari byinshi. Icyo gihe ababyeyi babyaraga abana bavukana virusi itera sida, ariko nyakubahwa First Lady yafashe iya mbere kugira ngo arebe ukuntu umubyeyi ufite virusi itera sida ashobora kubyara umwana akavuka ari muzima. Mu by'ukuri kiriya kintu cyaradufashije cyane, ku buryo mu ngamba zacu z'urugaga nyarwanda rw'abafite virusi itera sida kiri mu za mbere zidufasha kurwanya ubwandu bushya. Kumva umubyeyi ufite virusi itera sida ashobora kubyara umwana, akabyara umwana muzima. Iki gihugu cyacu cy'u Rwanda, ababyeyi bacu bitabira gahunda za muganga neza, ku buryo umwana uvutse ku mubyeyi ufite virusi itera sida avuka ari muzima. Mu by'ukuri njye mvuze ubuhamya bwanjye ni burebure kuba ndi na hano, mba numva binashimishije cyane, byongera n'iminsi yo kubaho.
muri urwo rugendo twakomeje dukora, abana bacu barize, Global Fund turabashimira cyane, mwaradufashije, abana bacu barize. Twakomeje gukora urugendo rurerure ku buryo leta y'u Rwanda yaradufashije ku buryo ibijyanye n'akato n'ihezwa rwose muri iki gihugu cyacu cy'u Rwanda ntabwo tuvuga ko bihari. Twageze iyo tujya ko natwe turi mu bantu bavuga ari kumvikana. Nkaba rero mu buhamya bwanjye mu gusoza, ndasoza nshimira abantu bose bari hano baba baragize uruhare mu kugira ngo umuntu ufite virusi itera sida ashobore kugira ubuzima buhoraho. Mwarakoze cyane, turabashimira cyane, kandi nyakubahwa First Lady, abafite virusi itera sida igihe cyose twicara tugusabira umugisha ku Mana. Imana igikomeza guha umugisha, murakoze, Imana umugisha.
Murakoze cyane, Sylvie. Thank you very much to Sylvie Muneza, who just shared a very touching story. As she says, her testimony is really, really long, but she picked just a few points, including how she went from discovering that she was HIV positive, the initial stigma that she felt, the advocacy that she started with other women, and the access that she was able to get to the treatment. And she thanked in particular the Imbuto Foundation, the foundation of the First Lady of Rwanda, for the support that was provided to her and many of her colleagues. And she mentioned thanking the community, and now she's come a long way, and she doesn't feel stigmatized anymore, but really it's a normal life. She has raised her children who are now at school. And so we thank her, because this helps us see that there's real impact happening. And it goes back to what we were saying today about causes for celebration. I would like to invite another special remark, continuing with the theme of women's vulnerability to HIV and AIDS. I'd like to welcome Her Excellency Madame Rebecca Akufo-Addo, First Lady of the Republic of Ghana, to share some of her thoughts around how gender inequality increases women's vulnerability.
Good morning, everyone. I bring you greetings from Ghana. Madame Jeanette Kagame, my sister First Ladies, distinguished partners, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. Gender inequality affects both men and women in different ways along the HIV continuum. From contracting the virus to management. However, some gender and societal norms work to increase women's vulnerability to HIV. I'll briefly mention a few issues that predispose women to greater vulnerability than men. The first is limited or total lack of education. A female child is more likely to be withdrawn from school due to household poverty, limiting her economic viability and ability to make informed decisions and choices, including sexual and reproductive decisions. This leaves her susceptible to behavior that will likely expose her to STDs, including HIV. The second issue is poverty. Girls from poorer backgrounds are more likely to do all manner of jobs to contribute to the family income. Some get raped or engage in transactional sexual encounters with casual sex partners, often with no protection, exposing them to contracting HIV. Other girls are married off at an early age to older men who may be HIV positive. So parents can receive dowries and reduce the number of mouths to feed. The last issue I want to talk about is gender-based violence. Gender-based violence exposes women to the possibility of becoming infected with all forms of sexually transmitted diseases, including HIV, and reduces the ability of women to protect themselves. These three are by no means exhaustive of the gender-based factors that lead to increased vulnerability of women to HIV. What is clear, though, is that tackling gender inequality is key to reducing women's vulnerability to HIV. At the Rebecca Foundation, we are working hard through our Terima and Because I Want to Be initiatives to address some of these pertinent issues which are central to reducing women's vulnerability to HIV, whilst improving their lives as a whole. Both projects seek to provide socio-economic empowerment to women and young girls through education, mentorship, and skills development. And I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency, First Lady of Ghana. We will now invite remarks from two discussants. We have a microphone here at the front. Mr. Mohamed Mustafa Malik Fall, who's the UNICEF Regional Director for Eastern and Southern Africa. And he's going to reflect on how we can link HIV services and psychological support as we improve mental health and the well-being, especially for adolescents.
I can stand here. Okay. Thank you. Your Excellencies, the First Lady here present, our global leaders from UNAIDS, from WHO, from Global Fund, all the partner and colleague from the civil society, my fellow colleague from UN. And let me just say, I know time is a challenge, that a topic could not be more relevant and more crucial to the continent, but most importantly also more timely, that this linkage between mental health and HIV. The reason why I think, and we have to insist on it, it is the way it impacts on the adolescent. Adolescence, as you can see, is a life cycle or part of the life cycle in which most of, or the most important physical, cognitive, emotional changes in a human being occurs. And contrary to what is believed, or most of the time what we feel or we think, it is also a period of life where you have a strong level of disease burden, whether they are physical or they are emotional or mental. And I just wanted also to share here a few figures. If you look at the disease burden when it comes to HIV today, in the continent we are talking about 1.5 million adolescents infected with HIV. We are also talking about a pattern where the new infection is expanding so rapidly among the adolescent population. And what is striking is what has been highlighted since this morning. It is the gender dimension of this pattern of new infection. 80% of the new infection are affecting girls. Coming back to the subject or the issue that has been highlighted, saying completely how the gender inequality, how socioeconomic disparities, how gender-based violence, how sometimes harmful practices or social norms really impact the epidemic and affect particularly young girls. Let me just maybe highlight one, just maybe few positive notes. One of them is that we are seeing that increasingly in the HIV community, people are linking the response with the dimension that are involving mental health. We are seeing more and more that in all adolescent services, you have referral pathway, you have care which are taking into account the mental health and the psychosocial dimension. We note also that peer support is a part of something that is helping adolescents to overcome the challenge they are facing in terms of psychosocial need, the challenge they are facing in terms of stigma. Another dimension is the participation. We realize that the more adolescents participate through peer interaction and through other forms of participation, the response is much stronger and their adherence to the response is much stronger. These are the conclusion and a note I wanted to build on, maybe to take this opportunity and make an ask to the First Lady, make an ask to the civil society here represented, make an ask to all the participants and to all the partners that really work moving forward. We need to highlight this linkage between the services that are provided on HIV/AIDS to take into account the dimension of mental health, to take into account the dimension of psychosocial support. And we have example in countries like Zimbabwe, where with AfriCAID, with partner, we are working and seeing much greater adherence to the treatment program from young people, including pregnant adolescents, including adolescents with disability. Now, can we build on those examples to amplify them, to scale them up, not only in the context of Southern Africa, but in the entire continent? This is one of the asks, and this is one of the partnerships we stand for UNICEF, and wanted to accompany the civil society and all the partners to further engage in this direction. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Mr. Mustafa Malik. We heard earlier from Her Excellency, the First Lady of Niger, about the need to look at the triple elimination of maternal to child transmission of 3 specific infections. And I wanted to ask one person here in particular, Mr. Jiré Rotevosian, the Executive Director in Government Affairs at Gilead Sciences. What are some of the thoughts that you have around this, why we should advocate for the triple elimination of maternal to child transmission for HIV, hepatitis, and syphilis?
Thank you very much. I know, colleagues, the time is short, so I'll be very brief. I do want to thank you for the opportunity to be discussed in here to represent the private sector. I also want to thank OAFLAT and all the honorable First Ladies for this important topic of looking at how HIV can be integrated into the broader health and development goals. As the honorable First Lady of Niger has already noted, there has been tremendous progress in the area of prevention to mother-to-child transmission of HIV. However, we are not seeing that progress for hepatitis B and for syphilis. The lessons learned and the experience from the HIV response can and must be leveraged to achieve triple elimination. And this includes developing comprehensive integrated service delivery models for screening, treatment, and preventing transmission among women. And it also means that we must be smarter global health advocates, all of us in this room. We must support integrated funding for health programs beyond single disease areas and break down the silos we see in donor development aid. And the private sector also has an important role to play. At Gilead, we recognize that science alone will not solve every problem. We dedicate significant time and resources to collaborate with community-based organizations, healthcare providers, academic institutions. We provide medical education, disease awareness, and financial support for integrated public health solutions. And we work directly with governments to support system strengthening as well as delivery optimization throughout Africa. More specifically, we include support for testing and screening for HIV in the context of hepatitis. Why should we advocate for the triple elimination? The answer is very simple. We have the tools. You've heard it here today from WHO, from Global Fund, from UNAIDS, and we know the way. The First Ladies are leading. So we owe it to the communities that we seek to serve to be smarter global health advocates, to demand more from global donors, and build the political will to make that triple elimination possible. Thank you.
Thank Thank you, Mr. Retevosian. We've heard here today about the importance of leadership and the leadership that the Organization of the African First Ladies for Development is providing. We've reflected on many of the factors, and so wanted to have one person in particular tell us, we reflected on the importance of the role of the community in the fight against HIV and AIDS. And so Mrs. Is a community mentor at Mothers to Mothers, and she's a team lead, and she has just a few thoughts to share with us today.
Good morning, Your Excellencies, esteemed ministers, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. It is an honor and a privilege to join you today. Brother Awora Kuro, and I am a frontline healthcare worker at an African organization called Mothers to Mothers, also known as M2M. Let me start by sharing a story that demonstrates why gender inequality and poverty makes so many women vulnerable to HIV. A few years ago, my colleagues were working in the Nairobi slums of Mathare to identify women in need of healthcare services. They met Maureen, a young pregnant woman who had not yet been to the clinic. They persuaded her to visit us there to ensure that she received proper antenatal care and an HIV test. The results came back positive, and she was devastated. I know that feeling, so I shared my own story with Maureen. I told her how I learned that I was living with HIV, and after a routine antenatal checkup, my test results came back positive, and the feeling felt like a death sentence. I thought my child would be born HIV positive. Well, I figured an abortion was the only choice that I had at that moment. Fortunately, a nurse at the clinic introduced me to M2M's Mentor Mothers, and they educated me on and they provided education and services that I needed to ensure that my child would not be HIV positive. So they also helped me disclose my status and supported me throughout my pregnancy. My son, Giovanni, was born HIV-free, and thank you. So my son, Giovanni, was born HIV-free, and I joined M2M as a mentor mother. Yet, in a cruel twist of fate, Giovanni died when he was 14 months old from pneumonia. I drew upon my fellow mentor mothers for strength and support. And now I use this experience to educate other women on the importance of ensuring that they do not transmit HIV to their children. Having heard my story, Maureen agreed to trust me, and we made sure that she got the medication and support she needed. We also arranged follow-up meetings with her. In time, Maureen trusted me enough to share her story with me. She had been living in an unstable area within the border, and she had been kidnapped by gangsters, brought to Nairobi, and coerced into having sex. Unfortunately, she contracted HIV as a result of this sex trafficking. For Maureen, poverty, conflict, gender inequality, a lack of education, and many other factors made this situation terrible. Maureen's situation was particularly bad, but the end result of a young woman being infected with HIV and feeling alone, hopeless, and unable to access healthcare while pregnant is all too common. There are no simple cases in my work, which I want to tell you about briefly. M2M ensures that one of Africans' greatest strengths, that is women, are at the heart of our work. We employ women living with HIV as frontline healthcare workers. These mentor mothers deliver health services in 8 African countries. Since 2001, when we started with the goal of eliminating mother-to-child transmission of HIV, we have grown to offer a broad range of services for women and their families. By the end of this year, M2M will be in 10 countries with the addition of Ghana and Angola. Next year, we plan to open in Equatorial Guinea. So these M2M integrated services that have ensured Maureen's story has a happy ending. She is healthy, and she has given birth to not one, but 2 HIV-free children. Thank you. Her children are now enrolled in M2M's Early Childhood Development Program and are not only surviving but thriving. So Maureen's husband was later tested for HIV and initiated on antiretroviral therapy. We have achieved virtual elimination of mother-to-child transmission of HIV for the past 5 years. And 97% of the children in our early childhood development in 2017 reached all their milestones at the end of their first birthday. We've done all this and created over 10,000 jobs for all African women. Not all, sorry, but for African women. These are powerful results made possible because of women working together, delivering integrated services by the community for the community. Today, one of our key challenges is helping adolescent women. A lack of education and opportunity means these women are often preyed by sex predators who offer money and goods in exchange for unprotected sex. Gender inequality makes it so hard to say no. All too often, gender-based violence is part of this horrible equation as well. And when these young women do try to access health services, they can easily be discouraged by the long waits at the clinics, and which is also caused by ongoing resource shortages. So it is no surprise to hear from UNICEF last week that 3 in 4 newly HIV tests in 4 newly infected adolescents in 2018 were girls. As a group of influential African leaders, I want to humbly ask one thing of you today. Let's tackle gender inequality by ending the idea that female community health workers can be volunteers. This is a real job, and a hard job for that matter. And when women are paid and professionalized, like I am at M2M, the results are transformative. So please help to make sure all women, all female community health workers are paid and recognized as the life-saving professionals that we are. Not only will this create game-changing health improvements and economic empowerment or opportunities for entire families, it will also boost African economies as a whole. In closing, I'd like to remind you all that when sleeping women wake, mountains move. At M2M, we are awake. We are moving mountains. And we look forward to your collaborations to create a healthy, HIV-free future for millions of deserving families. Thank you very much, and God bless Africa.
Thank you, Mrs. Akuro, for this important message. And as you said, frontline workers are contributing tremendously to these transformative results we reflected on today. As we come to an end, j'ai le plaisir d'accueillir Son Excellence Madame Antoinette Sassou Nguesso pour le discours de fermeture et Votre Excellence.
Distinguée Première Dame et chères sœurs, Madame la Directrice exécutive de l'ONU-SIDA, Mesdames et Messieurs les partenaires techniques et financiers, Mesdames et Messieurs les conseillers techniques, distingués invités, Mesdames et Messieurs. Au terme de plus de 2 heures d'échanges enrichissants, nous venons de réaffirmer notre incontournable leadership dans cette lutte que nous menons depuis environ une vingtaine d'années contre le VIH et le sida. Vos professions de foi et vos expériences de terrain ont montré, s'il en était encore besoin, la volonté des premières dames d'Afrique de contribuer à la mise en œuvre des objectifs généraux et spécifiques adoptés par la communauté internationale en matière de réponse à cette pandémie. La promotion des innovations communautaires, le plaidoyer pour le financement de la riposte durable en matière de santé, la réaffirmation de notre leadership sociétal, la promotion de la politique genre fondée sur l'accès équitable aux services de lutte contre le VIH-Sida et la prise en compte des politiques axées sur les jeunes, en vue de créer les conditions de la survenue à terme d'une génération sans sida, voilà à l'unisson de la communauté internationale des axes forts de notre action. Je suis convaincu que chacune des premières dames, avec l'appui de nos partenaires techniques et financiers, ne ménagera aucun effort pour que ces objectifs connaissent une exécution efficace dans nos pays, pour le bien-être de nos populations. Tout en vous donnant rendez-vous à notre prochaine Assemblée générale en début d'année prochaine à Addis Abeba, je souhaite à tous un bon retour et déclare close la session des hauts niveaux de l'OPDAD. Je vous remercie encore une fois.
Take a group picture, a group photo with the First Ladies. I'll invite our partners on stage to stand behind the First Ladies.
w'inama yabimburiye izindi inama yahuzaga abafasha b'abakuru nyine bari barimo kugira inama ahanini yagarukaga ku ruhare ihuriro ry'abafasha bakuru b'ibihugu bya Afurika bagize mu kurwanya icyorezo cya sida muri Afurika, aho Madame Jeannette Kagame yabashimiye uruhare bagize ndetse anagaragaza ko ubufatanye ari ingenzi ndetse byanatumye muri rusange icyorezo cya sida kigabanuka ku rugero rushimishije, aho yagarutseho ko mu cyegeranyo giherutse gukorwa mu mwaka wa 2000 cyagaragaje ko u Rwanda rwagabanije ubwandu bushya bw'agakoko gatera sida ku kigero cya 83%, ariko agaragaza ko muri iyi myaka ishize iki cyorezo cya sida mu Rwanda cyagabanutseho 82 muri rusange 82. Randuye agakoko gatera sida, ariko by'umwihariko n'ubuvugizi kuko twumvise ko nko muri Chad umufasha wa perezida wa Repubulika w'icyo gihugu yagaragaje ko zimwe mu mpungenge zari zihari ari z'uko ababyeyi bitaga ku bana babo barwaye agakoko gatera sida ariko bakanga nko gukoresha za gants. Ibi rero byashoboraga kongera ariko ibyo nanone biba binagaragaza n'urukundo bafitiye abana babo, ariko iyo myumvire ngo igenda ihinduka, kandi ibi byose ni ukubera nyine ubufatanye bw'iri huriro. Izi nama rero zitandukanye zose zigenda ziganira ingamba mu kurwanya icyorezo cya sida. Iyi nama izwi nka ikasa irimo kubera mu Rwanda, RBA irakomeza ko hababera. Iyi nama rero ikaba ariyo yabimburiye izindi n'izindi nazo rero mukaza gukomeza kuzikurikira kuri televiziyo Rwanda. Turabashimiye, mukomeze kubana na RBA.